Hi guys. Tonight we wake before the sun has fully decided whether it wants to show mercy or cruelty. The sky above you is still a pale, dusty blue, the kind that feels cool only because you know what is coming next. Sand presses faintly into your skin where you lie, and the air carries that dry, mineral smell that belongs only to places where water is precious. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls once, sharp and brief, as if reminding everyone to hurry. You blink, already aware that time itself is about to become your greatest ally. You stretch slowly, careful not to waste energy. Even now, before the heat arrives, you feel it waiting. The desert does not rush. It always wins by patience. You probably won't survive this if you wake too late. That's the quiet truth nobody sugarcoats here. Miss the cool hours, and the sun will take what it wants from you without apology. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Somewhere, someone else is also waking up to heat. Now, dim the lights, and let the story move forward with you already standing, brushing fine sand from your arms as the horizon begins to glow. You learn quickly that dawn is not just a beautiful moment here, it is survival strategy. Ancient Egyptians built their entire daily rhythm around these early hours, long before clocks, alarms, or productivity gurus told people when to wake. Farmers, laborers, artisans, everyone who could rose before sunrise. There is a mainstream historical understanding that most physical work began at first light, precisely to avoid the worst of the midday furnace. You feel that logic immediately as the cool air still slips easily into your lungs. The ground beneath your feet is firm but warming fast. You notice how even standing still creates a faint layer of heat around your ankles. That's why you move now. You walk with purpose, but not haste. Rushing wastes water. Hesitating wastes time. This balance is something you absorb without being taught, like muscle memory passed down through generations. As you walk, you become aware of sound in a way you rarely do in modern life. Morning here has texture. There is the soft scrape of sandals, the distant murmur of voices already awake, the gentle lap of water far away toward the river. Heat hasn't silenced the world yet. By midday, it will. For now, sound still exists. Historians often point out that ancient Egyptians divided their day not into hours as we know them, but into periods shaped by light and shadow. You feel how practical that was. Time is measured by the sun's position, by how long your shadow stretches ahead of you. When it shrinks too much, you know danger is near. Scholars still debate whether this sun-based scheduling emerged purely from environmental necessity or whether it also carried religious meaning tied to solar gods. Standing here, you suspect it didn't need to be one or the other. Survival tends to absorb belief naturally. There's a quirky detail that doesn't always make it into textbooks. Some ancient work songs were timed deliberately to match slow, steady movements in the early hours, not for motivation, but to prevent overheating. Singing too fast meant working too fast. Overexertion was punished immediately by the sun. You hum softly now, instinctively slowing yourself, even if you don't know the words. As the sun crests the horizon, warmth spreads across your shoulders like a hand pressing gently at first. Linen brushes against your skin. Already chosen for this climate, heavy fabrics would be madness here. The light color reflects heat, and the loose weave lets air move. This isn't fashion, it's engineering. A well-known historical fact is that linen production was widespread and essential, not just for clothing but for managing the climate itself. You feel grateful for every thread. The smell of damp earth grows stronger as you move closer to the river. Even from a distance, the Nile announces itself differently than the desert. It smells alive. That contrast teaches you something vital on your first morning. Heat can be endured, but only if water is near. Without it, dawn would just be a shorter prelude to death. You crouch briefly, touching the ground. It's cool now, By noon, this same sand could burn skin. That transformation is so dramatic, it almost feels malicious. Ancient Egyptians understood this intimately. They didn't romanticize the desert. They respected it the way you respect a wild animal, by keeping distance and following rules. There's an old fringe idea some researchers like to mention in passing, that certain early communities timed their waking moments not just by light, but by subtle changes in air pressure that signaled rising heat. It's difficult to prove, and many scholars remain skeptical. But standing here, you can almost believe it. The air feels different minute by minute. Tightening, thickening, as if preparing itself. You straighten and keep moving. Already, you can sense that the window is closing. The desert allows a few precious hours where work is possible, where bodies function close to normal. Miss that window, and even simple tasks become exhausting negotiations with your own limits. As you walk, you notice others emerging from their homes. No one lingers. No one chats idly. There will be time for that later, when the sun demands stillness. Right now is for motion. You exchange brief nods. Community here is quiet but absolute. Everyone knows the same rules. Everyone depends on everyone else following them. A faint breeze passes, carrying dust and the smell of river reeds. It cools your skin just enough to be noticeable, and that alone feels like a gift. You file the sensation away, knowing how rare it will feel later. Ancient Egyptian texts sometimes describe early morning winds as blessings rather than weather. Historians still argue whether those descriptions were metaphorical or literal expressions of relief. Either way, you understand the sentiment instantly. Your shadow stretches long in front of you, dark and thin. You watch it carefully. It is your clock. When it shortens too much, you will stop. Not because you're lazy, because stopping is smart. Because survival here is not about endurance competitions. It's about restraint. As the sun climbs higher, the color of the world shifts. Pale gold becomes bright white. Details sharpen, then begin to blur slightly at the edges. Your eyes squint instinctively. You're still safe, but the warning signs are already there. Heat always announces itself quietly first. You think about how many generations woke like this, morning after morning, building an entire civilization not in spite of the heat, but around it. This isn't a story of conquering nature. It's a story of listening to it closely enough to stay alive. And as you take your next step, feeling warmth rise steadily through the soles of your feet, you understand the first rule of ancient Egyptian survival. You don't fight the sun. You move before it notices you. You keep walking as the light strengthens, and soon the desert begins to soften into something unexpected. The sand grows darker, packed tighter underfoot, and the air shifts from dry and brittle to faintly cool and damp. You smell it before you see it. Water, not a puddle or a trickle, but a presence so large it changes everything around it. The Nile does not announce itself with noise. It announces itself with life. As you approach the riverbank, the heat loosens its grip just slightly, not enough to forget it, but enough to breathe more deeply. The surface of the water reflects the rising sun in broken shards of light, and reeds sway gently, whispering against one another. This river is the reason you are alive right now. Without it, the dawn routine you just learned would mean nothing. Survival here begins and ends with this slow-moving ribbon of water. It's a well-established historical fact that ancient Egyptian civilization depended almost entirely on the Nile's annual flooding. That flood didn't just bring water. It brought cooler, nutrient-rich silt that transformed scorched land into fertile soil. Standing here, you feel how temperature itself changes near the river. The ground holds moisture longer. The air moves differently. Heat still exists, but it's tempered, diluted, manageable. You kneel and dip your fingers into the water. It's cooler than the air, but not cold. The sensation travels up your arm, grounding you. Egyptians bathed frequently, not out of luxury, but necessity. Cooling the body wasn't optional. It was maintenance. Sweat evaporates faster near water, making even simple tasks more bearable. There's a quirky detail that often surprises people. Some households kept shallow basins of Nile water inside their homes, not just for washing, but to subtly cool indoor air through evaporation. It wasn't air conditioning, but it was clever. You imagine the relief of stepping into a shaded room where water quietly does its work, drawing heat away without a sound. As you watch the river flow, you realize it also controls time. Daily routines bend around it. Farming, fishing, washing. Even social gatherings cluster near its edge during hotter months, away from the Nile. The desert dictates terms. Here, negotiation is possible. Historians still debate how predictable the Nile's flood cycles truly were in early periods. Some argue ancient Egyptians possessed advanced observational knowledge that allowed them to anticipate changes with remarkable accuracy. Others believe much of it was guesswork, wrapped later in religious explanation. Standing here, watching water slide past your ankles, you suspect predictability mattered less than adaptability. When the river changed, people changed with it. You notice boats already moving, long and narrow, gliding with minimal effort. Transport on water spared both people and animals from the heat of overland travel. Carrying goods by river meant fewer footsteps on burning ground, fewer bodies exposed to the sun. Even heavy stone traveled this way, quietly floating while the desert watched from a distance. The smell along the riverbank is rich and layered. Wet soil, crushed plants, fish, human sweat, smoke drifting from early fires. It's not unpleasant. It's alive. Compared to the sterile dryness of open sand, this place hums softly with activity. You feel energy here, but it's a gentler energy, spread out rather than concentrated. Children splash near the edge, watched carefully. They adapt faster than adults, laughing as water cools their skin. Adults know better than to stay submerged too long. Too much sun reflection off water can be just as punishing. Balance again. Everything here is about balance. You fill a small container, lifting it carefully. Water is precious even when abundant. Spilling it feels wrong. You drink slowly, letting it coat your mouth, aware that clean water is not guaranteed. Beer, made from fermented grain and water, will come later. Safer in many ways. But now, this is enough. There's an old fringe theory that ancient Egyptians believed the Nile itself moderated the sun's anger, acting as a physical and spiritual buffer between humanity and overwhelming heat. Most modern scholars dismiss this as symbolic language rather than literal belief. Still, as you stand with water cooling your skin and breeze rising gently from its surface, the idea doesn't feel entirely foolish. You glance back toward the desert. From here, it already looks harsher, brighter, less forgiving. Distance changes perception. The river creates a pocket of tolerable reality, a place where heat can be managed instead of feared. Settlements cling to it like lifelines because that's exactly what it is. As the sun climbs higher, you notice people beginning to slow. Tasks near the river continue, but with caution. Work that must be done is done here first, where water waits within arm's reach. The wisdom is unspoken but universal. Never stray too far without a reason. You rinse your hands and face, then stand, feeling the contrast as water evaporates. For a brief moment, you are cool. That moment matters. Ancient Egyptians learned to collect moments like these, stacking them together to survive long days. The river moves on, indifferent to your gratitude. It has been doing this for thousands of years, long before you arrived, long after you will leave. It doesn't promise safety. It offers opportunity. What you do with that opportunity determines whether the heat will merely exhaust you or end you. You turn away reluctantly, carrying water with you. Knowing the farther you go, the more valuable it becomes. Behind you, the Nile continues its steady flow. A quiet reminder that even in the harshest landscapes, survival often depends not on strength, but on knowing where relief can be found. You step away from the river and toward shelter. Feeling the air change almost immediately, the ground dries, the breeze thins, and the sun grows bolder with every step. Ahead of you, low structures rise from the earth as if they belong there rather than sit upon it. These are not houses that fight the heat. They cooperate with it. You duck slightly to enter one, and the first thing you notice is the quiet. Sound doesn't bounce here the way it does outside. The walls are thick, cool to the touch, made from mud brick shaped by hands that understood this climate better than any modern blueprint. The temperature drops just enough to register on your skin, like a soft exhale after holding your breath too long. Mud brick construction was not a sign of poverty or simplicity. Excavated remains show it was a deliberate choice, refined over centuries. Sun-dried bricks trapped heat slowly during the day and released it just as slowly at night. That delay mattered. It meant afternoons were survivable and evenings were gentle. You rest your palm against the wall and feel stored coolness lingering from the night before. The doorway is narrow. Windows are few and placed high. At first, it feels almost claustrophobic. But then you understand the intention. Openings invite heat. Shade preserves life. Light filters in indirectly. Soft and manageable. Never harsh. Your eyes relax. Your breathing steadies. There's a small courtyard beyond the main room, open to the sky, but protected on all sides. You step into it and feel air move differently here, caught and redirected by walls. Warm air rises. Cooler air slips in beneath it. This passive airflow isn't accidental. The layout encourages breath without exposure. Long before fans or vents, Egyptians shaped air itself. One overlooked habit shows how intentional this design really was. Floors were often kept damp during the hottest hours. Not flooded, just lightly moistened. As water evaporated, it pulled heat with it. You imagine someone quietly sprinkling water across packed earth while the sun blazed outside, creating a pocket of relief that cost almost nothing. Some researchers believe courtyards also functioned as thermal buffers, absorbing heat before it reached inner rooms. Others think their role was more social, a gathering place that happened to cool things down. The remains don't settle the argument cleanly. What's clear is that standing here now, you feel protected in a way open shade never provides. You notice that ceilings are higher than expected. Heat rises, and the space above your head acts like a reservoir, keeping the living area below tolerable. Smoke from cooking fires drifts upward, escaping slowly through roof openings. It stings your eyes faintly but carries heat away with it. Comfort here is never perfect. It's negotiated. The smell inside is layered. Earth, smoke, oil, old water. It's not unpleasant. Just lived in. Outside, heat sharpens scents until they feel aggressive. Inside, they soften. Even smell is managed here. Furniture is minimal. Mats, low stools, storage jars. Nothing blocks airflow. Nothing traps heat near the body. You sit low to the ground, where air stays cooler, instinctively curling slightly to conserve comfort. Egyptians slept close to the floor for a reason, and it wasn't humility. There's a small detail etched into wall paintings that often gets missed. Figures are shown seated or reclining during the hottest parts of the day. Indoors. Doors partially closed. This wasn't leisure. It was strategy. Stillness reduces heat production. Movement is rationed like water. Some scholars question how widespread these architectural features truly were outside wealthier households. Rural homes were simpler. Yes, but even there, the same principles appear again and again. Orientation away from direct sun. Thick walls. Minimal openings. The logic repeats because it works. You step back outside briefly, and the contrast hits you immediately. The sun presses down, unfiltered, and you feel heat bloom across your shoulders. Returning inside feels like relief earned, not given. Shelter here is not luxury. It's essential equipment. You remember the river cooling your skin earlier and realize homes are extensions of that same thinking. If you can't bring water everywhere, you bring its effects: shade, evaporation, stillness, delay. Every design choice buys time. As the day advances, you notice people retreating indoors in waves. Doors close. Voices soften. The settlement seems to inhale, then hold itself steady. Midday approaches, and the houses take over where the body alone would fail. There's an old idea floating around that Egyptians believed their homes mirrored the order of the cosmos, with courtyards representing sky and walls representing earth. Whether or not that symbolism guided construction is uncertain, what's undeniable is that these spaces made extreme heat livable. Day after day, generation after generation, you settle into the shade, feeling air slide gently across your skin. Outside, the sun continues its climb, indifferent and relentless. Inside, the walls wait patiently, doing what they were shaped to do. For now, you are safe, and in this place, safety is the quietest victory of all. You step back into the light, and almost immediately you feel fabric become more important than shelter ever was. The sun hasn't reached its cruelest strength yet, but it's climbing with intent. And now every layer between you and that heat matters. What you wear is not decoration. It's equipment. Linen rests loosely against your skin, pale and breathable, barely clinging as you move. It shifts with each step, allowing air to pass through instead of trapping warmth. You feel the difference instantly. Tight clothing would be unbearable here. Heavy cloth would be dangerous. This light weave is survival stitched into form. Wall reliefs and burial goods make it clear that linen dominated daily dress across social classes. From laborers to officials, everyone relied on it. The plant fibers were processed carefully, spun thin, woven loose. The goal wasn't warmth, it was release. Heat must escape, sweat must evaporate. The body needs permission to cool itself. You adjust the cloth around your shoulders, noticing how it drapes rather than presses. This design choice matters more than it seems. Airflow against skin increases evaporation, pulling heat outward. Modern science explains it clinically, but here it's understood instinctively. You learn by feeling, not by theory. There's a small, often overlooked habit that adds another layer of protection. Many Egyptians shaved their heads or kept hair cropped close, especially men. Less hair meant less heat retention. Wigs were worn for status or ceremony, not practicality, and usually removed indoors. You imagine the relief of a bare scalp under shade after hours in the sun. Cosmetic oils come next. You watch someone smooth a thin layer over exposed skin, not thick enough to drip, just enough to coat. These oils reduced moisture loss and reflected sunlight slightly. Some mixtures even carried scent, masking sweat and discouraging insects drawn by heat. One formula included ingredients that sound strange now, like crushed minerals or plant resins, but the effect was consistent. Protection through layering, not insulation. There's an amusing little contradiction buried in old records. While pale linen dominated everyday wear to reflect sunlight, certain professions favored slightly darker tones for outdoor work. Dirt showed less, and constant washing was impractical in extreme heat. Cleanliness here was measured differently. Practicality over appearance. Always, as you walk, you notice how sleeves are cut. Loose, often wide, never binding. They shade arms while allowing air to circulate underneath. Even garments that appear simple reveal quiet sophistication when you pay attention. Nothing here is accidental. Footwear follows the same logic. Sandals lift skin slightly off the ground, reducing direct contact with scorching surfaces. Soles are thin enough to remain flexible, but thick enough to create distance. Walking barefoot is common too, but only when the ground allows it. You test each step carefully, learning to read temperature through your feet. There's disagreement among historians about how universally certain clothing styles were adopted. especially in remote regions. Some evidence suggests local adaptations based on microclimates along the river. Others argue centralized fashion norms spread widely due to trade and shared religious imagery. What you experience now feels less like fashion and more like a shared understanding of heat. You tug the fabric away from your neck, creating a pocket of shade. That small movement drops your body temperature just enough to matter. It's a gesture repeated countless times across centuries. Subtle, efficient, almost unconscious. Children run past you, bare-chested, skin darkened by sun exposure. Their bodies handle heat differently, more resilient, less burdened by accumulated strain. Adults cover up not just for modesty, but for endurance. Direct sun drains energy faster than shade ever could. There's another curious practice that surfaces in scattered texts. Some workers dampened their clothing deliberately in the early morning. As the sun rose, evaporation provided extended cooling. It wasn't always practical, and it required access to water. But when conditions allowed, it made long tasks bearable. Not everyone agrees how common this was, but the idea fits the environment too well to ignore. As midday approaches, you feel sweat form beneath the linen, but instead of pooling, it disappears quickly. That's the point. Sweat that lingers becomes dangerous. Sweat that vanishes cools you without stealing strength. You notice how jewelry is minimal during work hours. Metal heats quickly. Weight exhausts. Adornment waits for cooler moments. Everything has its time. And the sun decides the schedule. The color of the fabric matters more now. Light tones reflect harsh rays, preventing skin from absorbing them directly. Dark cloth feels heavier immediately. You avoid it instinctively, even without being told why. Ancient choices often survive because they work, not because anyone remembers their origin. There's a long-standing discussion among researchers about whether linen production was driven primarily by climate or by cultural preference that later adapted to heat. The answer likely lives somewhere in between. Climate shapes culture. Culture refines response. Standing here, wrapped in cloth that feels like moving shade, the distinction fades. You pause, listening to the faint rustle of fabric as people pass. It's a soft sound, calming, almost like leaves in wind. Heat hasn't reached its peak yet, but you're ready. Clothing has already done its job, buying you time, preserving energy. As you move toward shade again, the sun bright and unapologetic overhead, you realize something quietly profound. In this world, survival doesn't demand strength or speed. It demands attention to fabric, to movement, to the space between skin and air, and wrapped in linen that breathes as you do. You step forward, still part of the day, not yet defeated by it. The sun climbs higher now, and you feel it most through your feet. What was merely warm earlier has begun to turn hostile. The ground storing heat like a quiet threat. Each step demands attention. You don't rush. You test. You listen through the soles of your feet. Bare earth behaves differently than sand. Packed soil near homes warms slowly and releases heat unevenly, while open sand becomes a trap almost instantly. You learn to read color and texture the way others read weather reports. Pale sand burns faster. Darkened soil near the river holds moisture longer. Stone heats brutally, then stays hot long after sunset. This knowledge isn't written down. It lives in habit. Reliefs and everyday scenes carved into tomb walls show people moving with deliberate posture. Knees slightly bent. Steps measured. It's easy to miss. But once you notice it, it's everywhere. This wasn't artistic coincidence. It reflects a way of walking that minimizes contact time with scorching surfaces. You shorten your stride now, lifting your feet just enough, never lingering. Sandals help, but only up to a point. Thin soles still transmit heat. Thick soles exhaust you. Balance again. You slide your foot forward, not stomping, letting momentum carry you rather than force. The motion becomes rhythmic, almost meditative. Walking itself becomes a cooling practice when done correctly. There's an odd little solution that appears in scattered household accounts. Some people dusted their feet lightly with fine ash before long walks. The layer reduced direct heat transfer and absorbed moisture, keeping skin drier. It wasn't universal, and it wasn't glamorous. But it worked just well enough to survive another journey. As the ground grows hotter, paths become narrower. You notice everyone hugging walls, fences, anything that throws even a finger's width of shade. The difference between sunlit sand and shadowed sand can be the difference between discomfort and injury. Shade underfoot matters just as much as shade overhead. You cross a stretch where no shade exists, and the heat bites immediately. You don't panic. Panic wastes energy. You move steadily, eyes forward, breathing shallow but controlled. Ancient Egyptians understood something modern people forget easily. Heat punishes emotion as much as effort. Calm conserves strength. There's no clear agreement among historians on whether people trained children deliberately in heat-walking techniques or whether it was learned purely through imitation. Watching children now, skipping instinctively from shadow to shadow, you suspect instruction wasn't necessary. The ground teaches quickly and painfully. When ignored, you reach shade again and stop, not collapse. Stop. Stillness lets heat drain away instead of accumulate. You feel your pulse slow, sweat evaporate, breath deepen. Rest here is not laziness. It's a skill. The smell of heated earth rises around you, sharp and dry, mixed with faint plant matter. It's a smell that signals danger without shouting. People who lived here learned to respect that scent. When the ground smells too hot, it's time to pause. You glance toward the river in the distance. Near its banks, walking remains easier longer into the day. Moisture delays the inevitable. But inland, movement becomes expensive quickly. Routes are chosen not for distance, but for survivability. The shortest path is rarely the safest. There's a curious practice mentioned in a few later sources. Some travelers carried small pieces of leather or woven matting to stand on during brief stops in open areas. They would place it down, step onto it, and wait, sparing their feet from direct contact. It's unclear how common this was, but it speaks to the same awareness you feel now. Even a moment of insulation matters. You resume walking, but slower. The sun is nearing its most punishing angle. Shadows shrink. Underfoot, shade becomes scarce. This is when people retreat indoors or gather near water. No task is worth damaged feet. Without mobility, survival unravels quickly. You think about how modern footwear isolates people from the ground entirely. Here, that separation is thinner, more honest. You feel the land's mood directly. It tells you when to move and when to stop. Ignore it, and consequences arrive fast. There's disagreement among researchers about whether foot injuries from heat were common or relatively rare. Skeletal evidence doesn't preserve burns well, leaving gaps in understanding. But lived experience suggests caution was constant. People adapted not because they wanted to, but because failure hurt immediately. As you finally step back into deeper shade, you exhale slowly. The ground cools beneath you, and relief spreads upward through your legs. You didn't conquer the heat. You cooperated with it, step by careful step. You sit low, feet tucked beneath you, letting warmth drain away. Around you, others do the same. Quiet and patient. No one complains. Complaining burns energy. Instead, you wait. The sun will move again. Shadows will lengthen. The ground will release its stored heat gradually. Until then, you respect the earth beneath your feet, knowing that survival here begins at the ground level and rises upward. One cautious step at a time. You feel the day tighten around you as the sun climbs toward its highest point. The light grows sharper, the air heavier, as if everything is being pressed flat beneath an invisible weight. This is the hour that demands discipline, not strength. Discipline. Work does not stop entirely, but it changes shape. Tasks that require force are already behind you. What remains is careful, minimal movement. You notice how people cluster near shade. Tools laid out before the heat peaks. Hands move slowly. Voices soften. Nothing unnecessary survives this part of the day. Daily records and scene carvings reveal a clear pattern. Labor began early, surged briefly, then tapered off long before noon. Heavy hauling, stone cutting, farming in open fields, these were completed, while shadows still stretched long. What you feel now explains why. The body simply cannot pay the cost of effort under this sun. You lift a tool and feel its warmth immediately. Metal absorbs heat quickly, becoming an extension of the sun itself. You set it down. Someone else shades it with cloth, preventing it from becoming unusable later. Even tools must be protected here. Everything exposed pays a price. There's a small but telling habit visible in work scenes. People pause frequently. Not long enough to cool completely. Just enough to reset. These pauses aren't marked by bells or orders. They happen organically. Like breathing. Work flows in waves, not lines. Some researchers argue that such pacing was enforced by overseers, especially on large projects. Others suggest it emerged naturally because pushing harder simply failed. Standing here, feeling heat seep into your muscles, you suspect authority had little to do with it. The sun was the only supervisor that mattered. Sweat forms again, thin and fast. You manage it carefully. Too much loss leads to weakness. You sip water sparingly, resisting the urge to gulp. Ancient workers learned this balance early. Drinking too much at once could make heat feel worse, not better. There's an unexpected detail preserved in letters from later periods. Workers sometimes carried small pieces of cloth soaked in cool water and pressed them against the neck or wrists during breaks. The effect was brief but powerful. Cooling blood near the surface eased the whole body. Not everyone had access to this trick, but those who did used it wisely. You glance at the sky. The sun is nearly overhead. Shadows shrink to nothing. This is the signal. Movement retreats indoors. Even animals understand this. Donkeys stand still. Heads low. Birds vanish into shade. Life pauses. Inside, work continues in quieter forms. Sorting. Planning, repairing, tasks that demand thought more than muscle. Heat dulls the body faster than the mind. And Egyptians exploited that difference. Mental labor fills the hottest hours, while physical effort waits. There's ongoing discussion among historians about how much choice workers truly had during this pause. Some interpret rest scenes as idealized depictions rather than reality. Others point to practical necessity overriding coercion. Whatever the truth, you feel the same pull now. Rest isn't a reward. It's survival protocol. You sit, back against a cool wall, knees drawn slightly upward. Air moves faintly around you. You close your eyes for a moment, not sleeping, just letting your pulse slow. The heat hums around you like a living thing. But it no longer attacks. The smell of cooked grain drifts in from somewhere nearby. Midday meals are light, timed to avoid digestion, adding heat. Food choices now are about not overheating from the inside. You eat slowly, barely chewing, conserving energy. There's a strange calm to this enforced stillness. The world narrows to breath, shade, sound. Insects buzz lazily. Dust settles. Even thoughts seem to stretch out. Slower and softer. Some ancient medical texts suggest midday rest was prescribed for health, not comfort. Heat, exhaustion, dehydration, and fainting were recognized dangers long before modern terms existed. Treatment was simple. Shade, water, stillness. It hasn't changed much. As time passes, the sun begins its gradual descent. You feel it not by temperature at first, but by sound. Birds return. Voices grow slightly louder. Someone shifts. Stands. Tests the air. The worst has passed. You rise carefully. Muscles feel heavy but intact. You survived the furnace hour by respecting it. That respect, repeated day after day, is what built lives here. As shadows slowly lengthen again, work will resume, measured and cautious. The sun will always return tomorrow. You prepare now not to defeat it, but to greet it on better terms next time. As the sun begins to lean ever so slightly away from its highest point, shade stops being just a convenience and becomes something closer to refuge. You notice how people treat it differently now. Shade is no longer accidental. It is sought, protected, shared. It feels almost sacred, though no one names it that way out loud. You step beneath the spreading leaves of a palm, and the change is immediate. The light softens. The air cools just enough to register. Your shoulders relax without being told. Shade here is not darkness. It is filtered mercy, the kind that allows you to keep going instead of giving up entirely. Throughout settlements, walls are built not just to enclose space, but to cast long shadows at predictable times of day. You notice how people gravitate toward the same shaded spots again and again. As if following invisible markers, these places were chosen carefully, shaped over time by observation rather than theory. Where shade falls longest, life gathers. Carvings and paintings from the period show people seated beneath trees, awnings, and overhangs with surprising consistency. This wasn't artistic laziness. It reflects daily reality. Shade dictated social geography. Conversations happened where the sun could not intrude. Deals were made where bodies could endure stillness. You sit with your back against a wall that has absorbed hours of sunlight. It radiates warmth slowly now, gentler than the air outside. This delayed release is intentional. Thick walls store heat, then give it back gradually, avoiding sudden temperature swings. Comfort here is engineered through patience. There's a small detail people often miss. Shade wasn't always passive. Temporary shelters, made of reed mats or cloth, could be repositioned as the sun moved. You watch someone adjust an awning slightly, chasing the edge of shadow across the ground. It's a quiet choreography, repeated endlessly through the day. Children cluster here too, playing in bursts before retreating. Laughter rises briefly, then fades as energy drains faster in the heat. Adults watch without interference. Everyone knows limits. Shade teaches restraint better than rules ever could. There's evidence suggesting certain public spaces were intentionally designed around shade access. Courtyards, market areas, even temple approaches were aligned to provide relief during peak heat. Whether this was spiritual symbolism or practical foresight remains unclear. What's certain is that standing here now, you feel protected in a way that open air never offers. You notice how shade alters sound. Voices don't echo as sharply. Movement feels slower. The world seems to breathe more quietly. This sensory shift encourages calm. And calm conserves energy. It's not accidental that disputes were less likely to escalate under shade. Heat fuels impatience. Shadow softens it. An unusual habit emerges if you watch closely. People often sit in ways that maximize contact with cooler surfaces. Backs against stone. Feet on packed earth rather than sand. Arms resting on shaded ledges. The body becomes a map of temperature management. There's some disagreement among researchers about how consciously people thought about shade versus simply reacting to discomfort. But when you see the precision with which shade is used, it feels deliberate. Generations of trial and error refined this instinct into culture. You sip water again. Slowly. In shade. Every sip works harder. Evaporation happens efficiently. Cooling spreads without stealing strength. You understand now why water breaks often happened here. Not in full sun. Even hydration needs shelter to matter. A breeze slips through the shaded space. Redirected by walls and trees, it carries dust and plant scent, but also relief. Shade without airflow helps. Shade with airflow saves lives. You lean slightly to catch it, adjusting your posture by instinct. Some ancient texts describe shade metaphorically as protection offered by the gods. Whether this language was devotional or descriptive is open to interpretation. Standing here, you suspect it was both. When heat feels personal, relief does too. You notice strangers sharing shade without conflict. Space is negotiated politely. No one guards it selfishly. In extreme conditions, cooperation isn't moral, it's practical. Losing shade to argument costs more than compromise. As the afternoon stretches on, shade moves. You move with it. Slowly. Deliberately. This dance continues until the sun begins its descent. Only then does shade loosen its grip on survival and become simple comfort again. You rise eventually. Muscles stiff but intact. Shade has done its work, giving your body time to recover without fully stopping the day. You step back into light cautiously, carrying that calm with you. In this place, shade is more than absence of sun. It is a shared understanding, a quiet agreement between people and land. Respect the heat, honor the shadow, and life continues. You notice hunger arrive differently in this heat, not as a sharp ache, but as a gentle thinning, a quiet reminder that the body needs fuel even when movement feels expensive. Eating here isn't about indulgence. It's about not making the heat worse from the inside. Meals are simple, deliberate, and carefully timed. You sit low, in shade, and eat slowly. The food itself feels light in your hands. Bread made from emmer wheat, coarse and dense but not heavy. Onions that bite slightly, their sharpness waking the senses without weighing you down. A handful of dates, sweet and sticky, energy packed into something small enough to carry without effort. Wall scenes and surviving household records suggest that meals during hot hours were modest by design. Large portions generate heat as the body digests them. Smaller, frequent meals spread the load. You feel the wisdom of that immediately. After a few bites, you stop, letting the food settle before continuing. There's a subtle trick at play in the foods chosen. Onions, garlic, and certain herbs stimulate thirst and encourage drinking, preventing dehydration before it becomes obvious. Cucumbers and melons, when available, deliver water quietly through food. Even grains, soaked or fermented, release energy more gently than rich meats. You take a sip of beer, thin and cloudy, nothing like modern versions. It's cool, slightly sour, and refreshing without being intoxicating. Fermentation made it safer than untreated water and easier on the stomach. For many, this drink was hydration disguised as routine. You feel it coat your mouth, easing dryness without demanding attention. There's an odd little dietary habit that surfaces in scattered references. Some households preferred foods eaten at room temperature rather than freshly cooked during the hottest hours. Hot food adds heat. Letting it cool first mattered. It's a small adjustment, but repeated daily, it preserves strength. Fish appears sparingly now, often dried or lightly salted. Heavy stews and roasted meats wait for evening. Fat slows digestion and traps heat. You learn to crave lightness instead. Your body adapts quickly when the sun insists. You notice how spices are used not for intensity, but balance. Coriander, cumin, and mint appear in modest amounts. They stimulate digestion and create a cooling sensation in the mouth. Modern science would later explain this as sensory distraction and physiological response. But here it's simply known to work. There's discussion among researchers about whether ancient Egyptians consciously categorized foods as cooling or heating in the way some later medical systems did. The written evidence is thin. Still, patterns in food choice suggest an intuitive understanding. You don't need theory when experience teaches the same lesson every day. You watch children eat with more enthusiasm. Their energy still high. Adults pace themselves, stopping before fullness. Overeating in heat leads to lethargy, headaches, nausea. Everyone has learned this the hard way at least once. You rinse your hands afterward, wiping them on linen. careful not to waste water. Cleanliness matters here. Not for comfort alone, but to prevent illness that heat would amplify mercilessly. Food spoils faster. Bodies weaken faster. Prevention becomes priority. There's a curious detail preserved in some medical papyri. Certain foods were recommended during hot spells not for nourishment, but for cooling properties attributed to them. Lettuce, for example, was believed to calm the body. Whether symbolic or physiological, people trusted these associations enough to follow them. You lean back slightly, letting digestion begin while remaining still. Movement immediately after eating feels wrong. The body needs calm to process food without overheating. This rest is brief but intentional. As time passes, hunger recedes without heaviness. That's the goal. You feel fueled, not burdened, ready to move again when the sun allows it. You glance around and see the same rhythm everywhere. Eating as maintenance. Drinking as strategy. No wasted effort. No excess? The heat enforces honesty. The body cannot lie about what it needs. There's some debate about how much variety truly existed in daily diets across regions. Access to fish, fruit, and vegetables varied widely. Yet the underlying principle remains consistent. In heat, simplicity survives. You gather your things slowly. The worst of the day has passed. Food has done its quiet work, cooling you from within rather than stoking the fire. As you stand, stomach calm and mind clear, you understand that survival here isn't just about shelter and shade. It's about choosing what enters the body as carefully as what surrounds it. Eat wrong, and the sun punishes you from the inside out. Eat wisely, and the heat becomes manageable. And with that understanding settled gently in your chest, you move on, carrying light nourishment into a heavy afternoon. Your mouth feels dry again before you even realize you're thirsty. In this heat, thirst doesn't always announce itself loudly. It sneaks in quietly, disguised as fatigue or distraction. You've already learned that waiting for thirst is a mistake. Here, drinking is scheduled, not reactive. You lift a small vessel, its surface warm from the air, and take a careful sip. Not a gulp, never a gulp. The liquid slides across your tongue and down your throat, easing dryness without shocking your system. Too much at once can make your stomach feel heavy, even nauseous. And in this heat, that heaviness becomes dangerous. Water is precious, but it's also unpredictable, drawn straight from the river. It can carry illness invisible to the eye. People know this, even if they don't understand microbes. Experience teaches faster than theory. That's why beer appears everywhere. At every hour, in every hand. This isn't beer as you know it. It's thin, lightly fermented, barely alcoholic, more grain water than indulgence. Brewing transformed questionable water into something safer, while adding calories the body could absorb slowly. You drink it the way others drink water, without ceremony, without celebration. Reliefs and written accounts suggest that beer was consumed daily by adults and children alike. Adjusted only in strength. It wasn't escapism. It was infrastructure. Hydration disguised as routine. Nutrition hidden in plain sight. You notice how it's consumed in shade, during pauses, never rushed. Drinking fast increases heat stress. Drinking slowly spreads relief evenly. This is another rhythm learned early, reinforced daily. There's a small, curious habit that surfaces in a few household notes. Some people let their drink sit uncovered briefly before consuming it, allowing it to cool slightly through evaporation. The loss was minimal. The comfort gained was not. Even seconds mattered. You rinse your mouth afterward, spitting carefully onto dry ground where it will evaporate instantly. Wasting liquid feels wrong, but so does swallowing too much. Balance again. There's disagreement among modern researchers about how dominant beer truly was compared to water. Some argue water remained primary in many settings, especially when drawn from cleaner sources or stored properly. Others point to brewing equipment found in nearly every settlement as evidence of reliance on fermentation. Standing here, feeling relief spread through your body from that small sip, you suspect the truth varied by moment, by place, by need. You carry the vessel with you as you move, taking tiny sips at intervals rather than drinking all at once. This pacing keeps your body from spiking in temperature as digestion begins. Even hydration creates heat when mishandled. Salt plays a role too, though quietly. A pinch mixed into food or drink helps retain water in the body longer. Too much causes thirst. Too little causes weakness. The margin is narrow. You respect it instinctively now. Children are watched closely during drinking breaks. They forget themselves more easily, gulping when excited. Adults intervene gently, guiding pace rather than restricting access. Dehydration harms them faster. Overhydration exhausts them just as quickly. You notice that drinking often happens sitting down. Standing increases heart rate. Heat multiplies effort. Sitting conserves energy while the body absorbs what it needs. Small posture choices ripple outward into survival. There's an old medical text that recommends cooling the hands and feet with water rather than drinking excessively during extreme heat. The idea was to reduce body temperature directly instead of burdening digestion. Whether this was widely practiced is unclear, but the logic holds. You dip your fingers briefly, then let them air dry. Feeling cool spread upward. As afternoon deepens, drinks become more frequent but smaller. No one waits until empty. No one drinks until full. Hydration here is maintenance, not reward. You feel clearer now. Headache avoided. Muscles steady. The sun still presses down, but it no longer feels like an enemy. More like a presence you've negotiated with successfully. You glance around and see the same quiet ritual everywhere. Cups lifted, pauses taken, shade shared, no speeches, no rules written, just knowledge passed through repetition. There's some debate about whether ancient Egyptians understood dehydration as a distinct condition. The words don't translate neatly, but they understood its effects intimately. Weakness, confusion, collapse. Prevention didn't require terminology. It required attention. As the sun begins its slow slide toward evening, you finish the last sip and set the vessel down. You don't feel empty. You feel balanced. That's the goal. In this place, survival doesn't hinge on dramatic acts. It hinges on small decisions made correctly again and again. When to drink, how much, how fast. Ignore those details, and the heat collects its debt quietly. You stand slowly, body steady, throat calm, and move on, carrying with you the simple understanding that in the desert, even water must be respected. Sweat becomes unavoidable now, not dramatic, not pouring. Just a constant sheen that reminds you the body is working even when you are not. In this heat, sweat is neither shame nor inconvenience. It is evidence that you are still regulating yourself, still alive. You feel it gather along your neck, your back, the hollow of your elbows, left alone. It would evaporate quickly under linen and shade. But sweat also carries salt, scent, and irritation. Managing it matters more than stopping it. Ancient Egyptians never tried to block sweat entirely. That would be foolish. Instead, they guided it. You reach for a small container and dip your fingers into oil. Just a trace. You smooth it across exposed skin, thin enough to disappear almost immediately. The effect surprises you. Your skin feels calmer, less tight. Moisture evaporates more evenly. The oil forms a subtle barrier, slowing water loss without sealing you in. This practice shows up repeatedly in surviving containers. Residue analysis, and wall scenes depicting daily grooming. Oils weren't luxury cosmetics reserved for elites. They were practical tools used by ordinary people to protect skin from sun, wind, and dryness. You feel the wisdom in your own body as the oil settles. Scent follows function. Oils were often infused with plant extracts not just to smell pleasant, but to discourage insects and mask the sharpness of sweat. In heat, scent intensifies quickly. Managing it preserves social comfort as much as personal dignity. There's a strange ingredient mentioned in a few recipes that makes modern readers pause. Crocodile fat. Rare, expensive, and not widely used, but recorded nonetheless. Whether it was effective or symbolic remains unclear. More common were oils from moringa, castor, or sesame, all chosen for stability under heat. You can feel why. The oil doesn't turn rancid. It holds. You notice that oiling happens in shade, never in direct sun. Applying it while overheated traps warmth temporarily. Timing matters. Everything here is about timing. Sweat continues to form, but now it behaves differently. It spreads thinly across skin, evaporating faster, leaving behind less residue. Salt doesn't sting as much. Chafing eases. This small adjustment saves energy hour by hour. You lift your arm and smell faint plant notes beneath the salt. Clean. Not fresh in a modern sense, but managed. In this climate, cleanliness is not absence of smell. It's absence of danger. Rot and infection thrive in heat. Care reduces risk. Hair is treated with the same logic. Oiled lightly. Braided or bound to reduce heat retention. Loose hair traps warmth. Controlled hair releases it. You understand now why shaved heads and close cuts were common, especially among workers. Hair was not identity here. It was insulation to be minimized. There's evidence that certain oils were believed to cool the body when applied externally. Whether this belief was symbolic or experiential is debated, but the cooling sensation you feel now is real enough. Part placebo, part physics. Either way, it works. Sweat also carries social meaning. Excessive sweating could signal illness or weakness. Managing it maintained trust in communal settings. No one wanted to appear incapable under the sun. Oil helped preserve composure when conditions tested it hardest. You sit still for a moment, letting the oil absorb. The smell of earth, plant resin, and warm skin blends into something grounding. The heat hums, but it no longer feels intrusive. It feels contained. There's a small habit you notice that speaks volumes. People wipe sweat not with their hands, but with cloth. Always downward. Always gently. Rubbing generates heat. Pressing absorbs moisture. Even wiping follows rules here. Some medical texts suggest oiling joints specifically to prevent stiffness caused by dehydration and heat. Ankles. Knees. Elbows. You try it. Feeling movement become smoother. Less resistant. Whether medicine or comfort. The effect is undeniable. As afternoon stretches on, scent becomes a shared language. You recognize people by familiar plant notes rather than faces alone. Identity here is layered. Sound, smell, shadow. Survival sharpens senses. Modern life dulls. There's debate among scholars about how standardized oil recipes truly were. Some believe formulas varied widely by region and status. Others argue certain blends dominated due to effectiveness. Standing here, you suspect people adjusted constantly, mixing what worked with what was available. You rise slowly. Skin protected. Sweat controlled. Scent softened. This is not vanity. It's maintenance. Without it, heat would claim energy silently, one irritation at a time. As you move back toward shade, the sun still heavy above you, you realize something subtle but important. Survival here isn't about dramatic resistance. It's about thousands of small comforts that prevent small stresses from becoming fatal ones. And with oil lightly on your skin, sweat doing its quiet work instead of fighting you, you continue through the heat, not as a victim of it, but as someone who has learned how to live inside it. Children move through this heat differently than you do. You notice it almost immediately, while adults pace themselves carefully, conserving every bit of energy. Children dart and pause in bursts, as if their bodies have not yet learned fear of the sun. They laugh, run, stop suddenly, then melt back into shade without thinking about it. Their instincts are quicker, less deliberate, but strangely efficient. You watch a group of them playing near a wall where shadow stretches longest. They sprint into the light for a moment, then retreat, breathless but smiling. No one tells them to stop. They don't need to be told. The heat teaches them its rules early, and they learn fast. Life records and burial evidence suggest that childhood here involved constant exposure to the environment rather than protection from it. Children weren't kept indoors away from heat. They adapted alongside everyone else. Their bodies learned early how much effort was safe, how long skin could stay in the sun, when thirst meant danger rather than inconvenience. You notice how lightly dressed they are. Fewer layers, shorter garments. Their smaller bodies shed heat more quickly, and adults allow them that advantage. Modesty bends around practicality when survival is involved. There's a small, easily missed behavior that stands out. Children instinctively lower their bodies closer to the ground during rest. Sitting, crouching, even lying flat in shade, cool air gathers near the earth, and they take advantage of it without explanation. Adults do this too, but children seem born knowing it. Some scholars suggest children acted as informal messengers of environmental change. If they retreated suddenly from play, adults paid attention. The body's response often noticed danger before the mind did. Watching them now, you see how this could be true. They scatter the moment heat shifts from tolerable to sharp. You hear an adult call out softly, not to scold, but to warn. A name, a gesture toward shade. Guidance here is quiet, never shouted. Panic spreads heat faster than effort ever could. There's debate about how much formal instruction children received regarding heat survival. Some believe it was largely unspoken, absorbed through imitation. Others argue specific rules were taught early. Standing here, watching behavior unfold, it feels like both. Correction happens gently, immediately, then disappears. Learning is constant, but never dramatic. Children drink often, but in tiny amounts. Cups are passed around. Sips are supervised without fuss. No one counts. No one measures. Experience sets limits better than instruction. You notice how quickly exhaustion overtakes them if play goes on too long. Faces flush, movements slow, and then, without protest, they stop. The body insists. They listen. There's a curious note in some later writings that children were thought to be more vulnerable to the sun's anger, yet also more adaptable to its presence. A contradiction that makes sense when you watch closely. They recover faster, but they falter sooner if ignored. Shade becomes their meeting place. They gather beneath trees, awnings, walls, leaning against each other, sharing warmth and coolness at the same time. Social bonds form in these pockets of relief. Heat shapes friendship as much as shared work. You sit nearby, feeling the same pull. Their stillness invites yours. The world slows further. Even thoughts seem to stretch out, becoming lighter. Adults watch with half attention, hands busy with quiet tasks. No one worries excessively. Survival here isn't about constant fear. It's about constant awareness. As afternoon drifts toward evening, children rise again. Energy returning as shadows lengthen. The sun loosens its grip, and laughter grows louder. This cycle repeats daily, carving resilience into young bodies long before memory records it. You realize then that endurance here isn't learned through hardship alone. It's learned through rhythm. Exposure balanced by rest. Freedom bounded by shade. Children absorb these patterns without naming them. Watching them now, you understand something deeply comforting. Survival here isn't just carried by knowledge and tools. It's carried forward in bodies themselves, shaped quietly by heat, time, and careful attention. And as the children run once more into the softening light, you feel that same readiness returning to your own limbs. The day is turning. The worst has passed. You rise slowly, following their lead, moving again with the desert rather than against it. You begin to notice the animals more once the heat settles into its steady, oppressive rhythm. Not the dramatic beasts carved into temple walls, but the everyday ones that share space with people without ceremony. Goats, cattle, donkeys, dogs. They do not complain. They simply adapt. And in doing so, they teach. Animals here are not kept at a distance. They move through courtyards, lean against walls, stand half in shade, half in sun, adjusting themselves constantly. You watch a donkey shift its weight, turning its body just enough to present less surface to the sun. It lowers its head, breath slow, conserving energy the way everyone else does. Livestock shelters are simple, often nothing more than low walls or reed coverings. They are not meant to enclose. They are meant to interrupt sunlight. Full enclosure traps heat. Partial cover releases it. You step into one and feel the air move differently. Guided, rather than blocked. Cattle stand shoulder to shoulder. Bodies close but not pressed. There is shade in numbers. Their combined mass creates pockets of cooler air beneath them, especially near the ground. People understood this and positioned shelters accordingly. Animals cooled each other, and humans benefited from the same principles. There's a small detail that often goes unnoticed. Animals are watered at specific times, never at peak heat unless absolutely necessary. Drinking raises body temperature temporarily. The timing matters as much for them as it does for you. You see a handler test the air, then wait, choosing patience over urgency. Dogs lie flat against packed earth, stretched out fully, maximizing contact with cooler surfaces. They pant softly, tongues out, evaporating heat through breath. You find yourself copying the posture instinctively when you sit. Legs extended, palms on the ground. The body recognizes wisdom wherever it sees it. Donkeys and oxen wear minimal harnessing during the hottest hours. Leather traps heat and rubs sweat into skin. Work animals rest not out of kindness, but necessity. An overheated animal is a liability, not an asset. Survival here is pragmatic, not sentimental. You notice that animals often share shade with people without conflict. A goat nudges close to a wall where you sit. You shift slightly, allowing space. There's no sense of intrusion. Shade belongs to whoever needs it most at that moment. There's an unusual practice hinted at in some agricultural notes. In extreme heat, animals were sometimes brushed or wiped down, not for cleanliness, but to remove excess sweat and dust that trapped heat against their skin. It's unclear how widespread this was, but the logic mirrors everything else you've learned today. You watch a farmer place water jars near livestock, not directly beside them, but a short distance away. Animals walk to drink, then return to shade, spreading heat movement across time instead of concentrating it. Even animal behavior is managed carefully here. Some scholars question whether Egyptians consciously studied animal thermoregulation or simply observed and copied what worked. Watching now, the distinction feels unimportant. Knowledge does not require formal study when experience repeats the same lesson every day. The smell of animals mixes with dust and oil, warm and familiar. It's not pleasant by modern standards, but it signals life continuing despite the heat. Animals that stop moving entirely are watched closely. Stillness can mean rest, or it can mean danger. The difference matters. As afternoon drifts on, you notice animals turning their backs to the sun, presenting narrower profiles. Birds tuck their heads under wings. Even insects seek crevices and cracks. Heat unites behavior across species. Everyone follows the same rules. There's a belief recorded in later writings that animals possessed an innate understanding of divine balance between sun and earth. Whether symbolic or observational, the idea reflects respect. Animals survived here long before people built walls. Their bodies remember what stone only imitates. You feel calmer watching them. Their patience is contagious. They do not fight the heat. They wait it out. In doing so, they model endurance without drama. As shadows lengthen again, animals stir first. A shift of weight. A low sound. Movement resumes gradually. People follow their lead, reading the same signals. The day loosens its grip. You stand, slowly. Joints warm but cooperative. The animals around you do the same. Together, you move back into the softer light, guided by the same unspoken agreement with the sun. In this place, survival isn't a human invention. It's a shared language, spoken by every living body that learns when to move, when to stop, and when to rest. The day reaches a point where movement no longer feels optional. It simply stops. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but with a collective understanding that settles over everyone like dust. This is the hour of stillness. When even intention slows down, you feel it in your chest first. A gentle pressure that suggests doing less is not laziness, but wisdom. You lower yourself into shade again. This time, without urgency. The heat has matured now. It no longer burns sharply. It presses, steady and insistent, draining strength in small, invisible increments. This is when ancient Egyptians chose not to resist at all. They paused the day itself. You notice how complete the stillness becomes. Tools are set down. Hands rest in laps. Conversations fade into murmurs or stop entirely. Even animals seem quieter. Breath shallow. Bodies arranged to lose as little moisture as possible. This is not sleep. Exactly. It's something lighter. A suspension. Scenes carved into stone often show figures seated or reclining during this part of the day. Eyes half-lidded. Bodies supported. These aren't moments of luxury. They're moments of conservation. Energy saved now means strength later. You lean back against a wall and let your spine relax. Muscles soften without instruction. The heat hums around you, but it feels distant, almost abstract. By surrendering movement, you've removed its leverage. Heat feeds on effort. Without effort, it starves. There's a small, almost playful detail hidden in some domestic accounts. People sometimes counted breaths during these pauses, slowing them deliberately. Fewer breaths meant less internal heat. It's unclear whether this was conscious practice or instinct refined into habit. Either way, you find yourself doing it now. Breath stretching longer. Quieter. You hear the faintest sounds. A fly buzzing lazily. Fabric shifting as someone adjusts position. The soft knock of pottery settling. Sound travels differently when the world holds still. Each noise feels larger, more important, then fades. Some modern historians debate whether these midday pauses were universal or varied by occupation. Large construction sites may have had less flexibility, they argue. But even stone cannot be moved efficiently when bodies overheat. Evidence suggests that even the most demanding work bent to the sun's schedule, no authority outranked physics. You feel hunger again. Faint but manageable. Digestion slows during rest. Which is exactly the point. The body redirects energy inward, repairing small stresses before they become failures. This is healing disguised as idleness. Your skin prickles as sweat evaporates slowly in the shade. Oil applied earlier keeps it from drying too fast, preventing that tight, cracked feeling that saps comfort. Everything you've done today funnels toward this moment of calm. There's an old idea, mentioned quietly in temple writings. That midday stillness honored the sun at its strongest, acknowledging its dominance rather than challenging it. Whether ritual or pragmatism, the result is the same. Survival through respect. You close your eyes briefly. Not sleeping. Just dimming the world. Thoughts stretch out. Lose edges. Modern urgency feels far away. Here, the body sets the pace, and the mind follows. Nearby, someone shifts position, careful not to disturb the quiet. Courtesy extends to sound. Even noise generates effort. You realize how deeply the heat has shaped social behavior. Loudness is costly. Calm is shared. There's no clock to announce when this pause ends. You'll feel it. A change in air pressure, a slight easing in the sun's weight, the return of birds. The body notices first. Then the mind agrees. As time drifts, you feel strength creeping back into your limbs. Not excitement. Readiness. The kind that doesn't rush ahead. This pause hasn't stolen time. It has preserved it. Children stir first. Sitting up. Testing the light. Animals follow. Shifting. Stretching. Adults wait a moment longer. Cautious. Then, slowly, the world resumes. You open your eyes fully now. Shadows have lengthened just enough to signal safety. Movement returns. Measured and gentle. The day continues. Not broken, but wisely divided. You rise with everyone else, feeling surprisingly intact. The heat didn't defeat you. You stepped aside and let it pass. In this place, rest is not the opposite of work. It is part of it. A deliberate choice woven into the rhythm of survival. And as you move forward again, you carry that stillness with you. A quiet strength earned by knowing when to stop. When movement returns, it does so cautiously. Not everyone travels during this part of the day. But sometimes the land demands it anyway. Messages must be carried. Goods must reach the river. Fields lie too far from shelter to ignore. When you travel now, you do it with planning, not hope. You step beyond the familiar cluster of shade and walls, and the world opens into brightness again. The desert stretches outward, pale and relentless, broken only by low vegetation and distant stone. Travel here is not about speed. It's about preparation, pacing, and knowing exactly when to stop. Routes are chosen carefully. You follow paths worn smooth by generations of feet, paths that curve slightly to stay near low ground or natural shade. Straight lines are rare. Efficiency here is measured in survivability, not distance. A longer route that offers shade will always win over a shorter one that burns. You carry little. Weight becomes heat almost immediately. Containers are small, just enough to matter. Tools are selected for necessity alone. Anything that does not earn its place becomes a liability within minutes. You feel this truth in your shoulders as you adjust your load. Before setting out, people often dampen their clothing lightly, not soaking it, just enough to buy a little time. As evaporation does its quiet work, the body stays cooler longer. It's not a solution. It's a delay. In this landscape, delays save lives. You move early or late whenever possible. If travel must happen during stronger heat, it is broken into short segments. Walk. Stop. Shade. Repeat. You count distance not in length, but in safe resting points. A rock outcrop, a lone tree, a low wall. Each becomes a destination. There's a small, telling habit you notice. Travelers keep their mouths closed as much as possible. Open mouths dry faster. Breathing through the nose warms air slightly before it reaches the lungs, reducing shock to the body. It's a subtle adjustment. But in heat, subtlety matters. You watch your shadow closely. When it shrinks too far beneath you, you slow or stop entirely. The sun's angle becomes your map. There is no stubbornness here, only calculation. Some inscriptions suggest official messengers trained specifically for heat travel, their bodies conditioned to long distances under extreme conditions. Others argue these figures are exaggerated, symbolic of endurance rather than literal athletes. Walking now, feeling heat creep into your calves, you suspect both views hold some truth. Training helps, but respect helps more. You keep your eyes down, not to avoid the horizon, but to avoid wasted effort. Looking far ahead invites impatience. Impatience leads to mistakes. Step by step, the land reveals itself in manageable pieces. The sound of your movement is soft. Sand shifts. Fabric whispers. Silence dominates. Heat dampens noise the way snow does. Even your thoughts seem quieter. reduced to essentials. You pause under a scrap of shade cast by stone. It barely covers your shoulders. But that's enough. You turn your body to present the smallest surface to the sun, standing narrow. Conserving moisture. Stillness returns briefly, like a familiar friend. There's an odd practice mentioned in a few travel accounts. Some people carried small reflective objects, polished stone or metal, not for signaling, but to redirect sunlight away from the face during stops. It's unclear how effective this truly was, but the intent speaks volumes. Every advantage was explored. Water is rationed strictly. You sip, not drink. You let saliva build naturally, resisting dryness through control rather than consumption. This restraint is learned, not intuitive. The first time someone ignores it, the heat corrects them harshly. You notice how your body responds when you resume walking. Muscles complain briefly, then settle. The rhythm returns. You're no longer fighting the land. You're negotiating passage. Animals traveling alongside humans follow similar rules. Donkeys stop when they need to. Forcing them only leads to collapse later. Everyone here understands that exhaustion is cumulative. Once crossed, recovery becomes uncertain. There's discussion among scholars about whether ancient travelers moved primarily by night during extreme heat. Some evidence suggests night travel occurred, especially for long distances. Others argue risks increased without visibility. The truth likely shifted with terrain and purpose. Standing here now, you understand why dawn and dusk were favored. Enough light, less punishment. As you approach your destination, relief arrives quietly. Not celebration, just the easing of tension. Shade appears. Walls rise. The river glints in the distance. Your pace slows further, allowing your body to settle rather than crash. You step back into shelter and feel the difference immediately. The land releases you. Heat loosens its grip. You didn't conquer distance. You cooperated with it. Travel here is never casual. It is a calculated exchange between body and environment, and each successful journey reinforces the same lesson. You survive not by pushing harder, but by knowing exactly when to stop pushing at all. As the day begins to soften again, your attention drifts toward the objects people carry with them. Not weapons or ornaments, but the small, quiet tools that make heat manageable. These are not impressive at first glance. They don't shine. They don't demand respect. But without them, survival would fray quickly. You pick one up, a simple hand fan made of woven reeds, light enough to move air without effort. You wave it slowly, not creating wind so much as encouraging movement. The air shifts against your skin, thin but noticeable. Too much fanning would dry sweat too quickly. Stealing moisture. Just enough extends comfort. You feel how precise even this small act must be. Containers matter just as much. Water jars are shaped not for decoration, but function. Narrow necks reduce evaporation. Rounded bodies distribute heat evenly. Clay breathes slightly, allowing contents to cool as moisture escapes through microscopic pores. You rest your palm against one and feel it cooler than the surrounding air. This isn't magic. It's design refined through repetition. There's a curious habit you notice among those who travel often. They wrap damp cloth around containers during the hottest hours. As water evaporates from the cloth, it pulls heat from the jar inside. The effect is subtle, but enough to matter. Cooling happens without fire, without effort, without waste. Tools used for work change shape with the season. Handles are smoothed and widened, reducing friction against sweaty palms. Rough surfaces trap heat and cause blisters faster. Blisters slow work. Slowness increases exposure. Everything connects. You notice hats and head coverings. Not heavy, but structured just enough to cast shadow over eyes and neck. Some are stiffened with reeds or layered linen. They don't trap heat. They redirect it. The difference between direct sun on the skull and filtered light through fabric is the difference between focus and dizziness. There's an odd little object hanging near doorways, a polished stone disc. reflective, catching light at certain angles. Some believe it was decorative. Others think it redirected sunlight away from entrances, reducing heat entering the home. The evidence is inconclusive. But standing here, watching light bounce softly instead of pouring inward, you suspect practicality played a role. You pick up a pestle and mortar, noticing how stone stays cooler than metal. Food preparation tools were chosen not just for durability, but thermal behavior. Grinding grain generates heat. Cooler materials slow that rise, preserving both food quality and comfort. Medical tools show similar thought. Knives kept shaded, containers sealed tightly. Heat spoils remedies quickly. Protection extends to healing as much as labor. There's debate among researchers about how consciously people understood material science. Did they know why clay cooled better than metal? Or did they simply observe outcomes? The answer matters less than the result. Choices repeated over generations tend to filter out what fails. You sit and examine your own hands. Slightly rough, warm, but intact. Tools have done their job quietly. They've absorbed stress so your body didn't have to. You notice how tools are stored during rest periods. Never left in direct sun. Never stacked tightly. Airflow matters even for objects. Overheated tools become liabilities later. Care now prevents loss later. Children are taught tool respect early, not because tools are dangerous, but because misuse costs energy. A dropped container spills water. A cracked jar loses cooling ability. Lessons are swift and practical. As evening approaches, tools come back into motion. Fans wave gently. Jars are lifted carefully. Knives return to hands now, cool enough to use them safely. The day's second phase begins. There's a quiet satisfaction in watching this transition. Nothing flashy, just competence. Heat has shaped not just bodies and schedules, but technology itself. Innovation here is measured by endurance, not novelty. You stand and sling a container over your shoulder, feeling its familiar weight, not heavy, reassuring. You know how long it will last. You know when to use it. That knowledge is worth more than the object itself. As shadows lengthen, tools and people move together again, synchronized by temperature rather than time. You step forward with them, carrying simple inventions that have already proven their worth. In this place, survival isn't built on grand machines. It's built on small decisions embodied in humble tools. Each one whispering the same lesson. Work with the heat, not against it, and the day will eventually let you go. As the day eases toward late afternoon, your body begins to reveal stresses you didn't notice earlier. Not pain exactly, but small warnings. Dryness in the throat that lingers longer than it should. Tightness behind the eyes. A faint ache in joints that worked through heat without complaint. This is when care becomes more than comfort. It becomes medicine. You step into a shaded corner where remedies are kept. Nothing dramatic waits for you here. No sharp smells or bitter shocks. Healing in this world is quiet. Built on familiarity and repetition, heat-related ailments are treated gently, early, before they grow into something that demands attention. You rinse your hands and wrists first, letting water cool blood near the surface. The relief spreads upward slowly. This simple act appears again and again in medical writings. Not described as cure, but as prevention. Cooling the extremities reduces strain on the heart. You feel your pulse settle almost immediately. Poultices are prepared nearby. Crushed plants mixed with water or oil. Not every mixture is meant to heal wounds. Many exist simply to cool skin, soothe irritation, or reduce swelling caused by prolonged heat exposure. You apply one lightly to your temples and feel the pressure ease. Medical papyri from this period list treatments that seem strange now, but their intent is clear. Balance. Cooling what has overheated, moistening what has dried, restoring flow where stagnation threatens. Heat was understood not as an enemy, but as a force that required counterweights. You sit while remedies work. Movement is minimized. Healing doesn't rush. The body needs stillness to absorb relief properly. You watch others nearby receiving similar care. No urgency. No alarm. This isn't a crisis ward. It's routine maintenance. There's an unexpected gentleness in how illness is approached here. Faintness, dizziness, exhaustion are treated not with blame, but with shade, water, and quiet. Heat exhaustion was recognized long before it was named. The response was simple and effective. You notice that remedies are adjusted by time of day. What cools too aggressively at noon might chill the body dangerously at night. Balance again. Everything returns to balance. There's discussion among historians about how much of ancient medicine was empirical versus symbolic. Some treatments were undoubtedly ritualized. Others worked because they addressed real physiological needs. Sitting here now, feeling relief spread gradually through your body. The distinction feels less important than the outcome. You smell herbs crushed earlier. Sharp and green. Some stimulate alertness, others calm. The choice depends on what the heat has taken from you. Too much lethargy requires gentle awakening. Too much agitation requires quieting. You realize how integrated medical care is into daily life. There's no separation between living and healing. Everyone knows a little. Everyone participates. Knowledge is communal, not specialized. Children watch closely, learning without instruction. They see when someone sits longer, drinks more, rests deeper. They absorb cause and effect early. Heat teaches medicine before books ever do. As the sun lowers further, treatments taper off. Bodies recover enough to resume gentle tasks. No one is pushed back into effort prematurely. That would undo everything gained. You stand slowly, testing your balance. It holds. The day hasn't broken you. Care intervened at the right moment. In this place, medicine isn't about conquering illness. It's about staying ahead of collapse. And as you step back into the cooling air, you understand that survival here depends as much on knowing when to heal as knowing when to work. As the heat finally loosens its grip, your thoughts drift upward, toward the sun itself. Not the warmth you feel on your skin, but the presence behind it, here. The sun is never just weather. It is personality, rhythm, authority. You have felt its weight all day, shaping every choice you made. Now, as its power begins to soften, you understand why it was never treated casually. You look toward the sky and feel something close to respect. Not fear exactly. Familiarity. The sun has rules, and you have learned them. Ancient Egyptians did not imagine the sun as distant or abstract. It was alive in their daily experience. Rising, burning, receding with dependable force. Living under it forged belief as much as belief shaped living. Ra's journey across the sky mirrored your own day. Morning was birth. Noon was dominance. Evening was survival earned. This wasn't philosophy. It was observation translated into story. When the sun stood overhead and movement ceased, it was not just practical, it was acknowledgement. Even gods required recognition. You notice how temples and sacred spaces often align with the sun's path. Doorways catch morning light. Inner chambers remain cool and dim. These structures do not fight the heat. They channel it. Light enters where it is welcome and stops where it would overwhelm. Worship here is shaded, controlled, deliberate. There's a subtle detail hidden in ritual timing. Ceremonies rarely peak at midday. They begin early or wait until afternoon. The sun's strongest hour is left undisturbed. Treated almost like a boundary no one crosses unnecessarily. Whether spiritual or practical, the result is the same. Bodies survive. Some texts suggest prayers were offered specifically asking for balance rather than relief. Not an end to heat, but restraint, moderation. The sun's power was not questioned. Only its excess was negotiated. You feel that negotiation now as evening approaches. The light grows warmer, less harsh. Gold replaces white. Shadows lengthen and soften. The sun becomes something you can face again without squinting. You feel gratitude without ceremony. There's debate among scholars about how literally Egyptians believed the sun traveled through the underworld at night. fighting chaos before rising again. Some argue this was symbolic language layered onto daily observation. Others believe it shaped genuine worldview. Standing here, watching light change minute by minute, the distinction blurs. Myth often grows from experience. You notice people lifting their faces slightly now, eyes open again, movements freer. The sun's authority hasn't vanished, but it has relaxed. This is the hour when stories are told, when teaching happens, when reflection replaces vigilance. You sit near a wall still warm from stored heat, feeling it release comfort rather than danger. The sun gave this heat earlier. Now it returns it gently. Reciprocity matters here. Nothing is wasted. There's an old belief recorded in fragments that shade itself was a gift granted by divine order. Walls, trees, overhangs weren't accidents. They were expressions of harmony between human effort and cosmic structure. Whether literal or poetic, the idea reflects something true. Survival required cooperation with forces larger than yourself. You watch children play again, this time without retreating as quickly. Laughter lasts longer. Movement feels safer. The sun no longer punishes curiosity. This daily transformation reinforces belief better than doctrine ever could. As evening deepens, rituals shift inward. Lamps are prepared. Fires are lit carefully. Not too large, mindful of lingering warmth. Light replaces sun without recreating its burden. Balance remains the guiding principle. You realize then that belief here isn't separate from survival. It's an extension of it. When you live under something powerful enough to kill you daily, you learn humility naturally. Gods become expressions of reality rather than abstractions. You stand and take a long breath. Air cooler now. Easier. The sun continues its descent. No longer an adversary. Just a presence completing its cycle. In this place, faith doesn't promise escape from heat. It promises understanding of it. And that understanding, repeated every day, is what allows life to continue beneath an unforgiving sky. As the sun lowers further, your thoughts drift toward what happens when the body finally stops moving for good. Heat shapes even this moment. Death here is not imagined as cold or darkness, but as another transition governed by the same forces that ruled daily life. You feel it in the air as evening settles. Softer now, forgiving, yet still present. You watch preparations unfold quietly. Not hurried, not fearful. The heat has taught patience so thoroughly that it follows people even into their final arrangements. Bodies are handled with care, moved into shade immediately, protected from the sun that once demanded so much restraint during life. Respect continues beyond breath. Burial practices reveal how deeply climate influenced belief. Bodies were dried deliberately. Moisture removed slowly to prevent decay in a land where heat would otherwise destroy everything too quickly. This was not vanity or obsession. It was preservation against the same environment you've spent all day negotiating. You stand near linen laid out carefully, clean and light, chosen not just for ritual purity but practicality. Linen breathes. It absorbs moisture. It resists heat better than heavier fabrics. Even in death, the body is wrapped in something that understands the desert. There's a small, often overlooked detail in early mummification methods. Before complex resins and oils, simple exposure to dry desert air did much of the work. Heat and aridity became tools rather than threats. Nature assisted ritual, and ritual respected nature's role. Some historians question how intentional early preservation truly was, suggesting mummification evolved gradually from practical necessity into spiritual tradition. Others argue belief drove innovation from the beginning. Standing here, feeling the dry air pull moisture from your skin, you sense how easily practicality could become sacred. You notice how tombs are positioned. Entrances angled, chambers sunk deep into earth. Below ground, temperature stabilizes. Heat loses its extremes. Coolness persists. Burial architecture mirrors housing architecture, but taken further. Shelter becomes permanent. Inside, Offerings are placed thoughtfully, food chosen for longevity, containers sealed tightly. Everything anticipates heat's long reach. Even the afterlife requires preparation against decay. There's debate among scholars about whether ancient Egyptians feared bodily destruction or simply accepted it as part of cosmic order. The care you witness suggests neither fear nor indifference. It suggests responsibility, a belief that maintaining balance after death mattered just as much as during life. You sit briefly, feeling the ground cool beneath you as night approaches. The desert releases stored heat slowly, like a long breath exhaled. This same patience governs burial. Nothing is rushed. Time itself is an ally here. You think back to the sun's dominance at midday. The stillness, the shade, the careful drinking. All of it prepared the living body to endure heat. Now those same principles guide what happens after life ends. Consistency offers comfort. There's a quiet calm in how people speak during these moments. Voices remain low. Movement stays measured. Even grief respects the environment. Excess emotion generates heat too. Drains strength when it's needed most. As lamps are lit, their flames small and controlled, you realize fire is treated differently now, no longer an enemy or threat, but a companion against darkness. Heat is moderated, never unleashed. You stand and look toward the west, where the sun sinks fully now. Its work done for the day. The cycle feels complete. Life, labor, rest, belief, and death all tied together by the same relentless star. In this place, survival does not end with breath. It extends into memory, architecture, and ritual. And as night finally takes hold, cooling the air around you, you understand that enduring the desert heat shaped not just how people lived, but how they understood their place in the world beyond it. With night settling in fully now, the air cools enough that movement feels different again. Muscles respond more willingly. Breath deepens without effort. This is when stories often turn toward labor on a grand scale. Because only now does the body feel capable of remembering what it endured earlier. You think of the workers who shaped stone under this sun, whose daily survival depended on understanding heat as precisely as anyone else. You imagine standing among them at dawn, tools ready, bodies already calculating the hours ahead. Large projects never began blindly. They began with timing, stone cutting, hauling, and setting was scheduled around temperature first, task second. Heat decided what was possible long before ambition did. Reliefs carved into temple walls show lines of workers moving in rhythm, not chaos. Their posture is deliberate. Movements are synchronized. This wasn't ceremony. It was efficiency. When everyone moves together, energy is conserved. No one rushes ahead and exhausts themselves early. No one lags behind and strains to catch up. You notice how often these scenes show men shaded by simple structures or cloth awnings while working. Even in open spaces, shade was manufactured wherever possible. A sliver of relief stretched endurance dramatically. Without it, labor shortened and injuries multiplied. There's a persistent discussion among historians about whether workers on massive building projects were coerced or compensated. While that debate continues, the physical evidence suggests something undeniable. Bodies had to survive long enough to work again tomorrow. No system, forced or free, could ignore heat without collapsing itself. You picture water being passed carefully along lines of workers. Small sips, frequent pauses, overseers watching the sun more than the progress. Heat enforced its own regulations. Ignore them, and productivity vanished. Tools used in stonework were chosen as much for thermal behavior as strength. Stone mallets absorbed heat slowly. Wooden handles prevented burns. Metal tools were shaded aggressively. Even a brief lapse could turn a tool into a hazard. There's an odd detail in some quarry records. Work would stop not only when heat peaked, but when stone itself became too hot to touch safely. Rock stores heat relentlessly. Once it crosses a threshold, it cannot be rushed back to usability. Patience wasn't optional. You think about how laborers protected their bodies. Linen wrapped tightly around heads, oil on skin to prevent cracking, rest positions chosen carefully, feet tucked under shade. Every survival trick you've learned today appears again here, magnified by necessity. Some scholars argue that large workforces developed collective heat tolerance over time. Others counter that tolerance has limits, and survival depended more on organization than adaptation. Watching this imagined scene unfold, you sense both truths at work. Bodies adapt. Systems must still protect them. As night deepens, fires appear at work sites. Not large, controlled, used to cook, repair. Plan. Heat now serves rather than threatens. The same sun that punished effort earlier has surrendered its role to human-made warmth. You feel a quiet respect for these workers now. Not awe for monuments alone, but for the daily discipline required to endure heat without modern aid. Survival was not heroic. It was repetitive, unglamorous, precise. As stars fill the sky, labor fades into rest. Bodies recover. Stone cools. Tomorrow's work will depend on how well tonight restores strength. You lie back, feeling the earth cool beneath you, and realize something subtle. The greatest structures built here were not victories over the desert. They were compromises with it. Agreements made stone by stone, hour by hour, under a sun that demanded respect. As the night settles more fully around you, the land changes character once again. The heat that dominated every thought only hours ago now retreats into memory, leaving behind air that feels almost generous. This is when farmers begin to stir again, preparing for work that depends on timing more than strength. Crops do not wait for comfort. They wait for precision. You walk toward the fields while stars still hang overhead. Their light faint but steady. Farming here is not about fighting heat. It's about slipping past it. Water from the river has already been guided carefully into channels, spreading slowly across soil that drank deeply earlier in the year. Now, moisture lingers just beneath the surface, hidden from the sun that will return soon enough. You kneel and press your fingers into the earth. It is cool, not cold, but alive. This is the window farmers protect fiercely. Seeds germinate best when soil temperature stays stable. And stability here is rare. Fields are worked when the land allows it, not when schedules demand it. Wall paintings show farmers bent low, moving steadily in early light. Tools light and familiar. Hoes and sickles are simple, shaped for control rather than force. Swinging hard wastes energy and overheats muscles quickly. Instead, movements are short, efficient, repeated hundreds of times without drama. There's a quiet trick farmers use that you notice immediately. They work in staggered lines rather than broad fronts. This allows some people to remain closer to irrigation channels while others move forward, sharing access to water and shade as they rotate positions. No one stays exposed too long. The field itself becomes a moving shelter. You notice how irrigation ditches are kept narrow and shallow. Wide channels lose water to evaporation quickly. Narrow ones deliver moisture efficiently while staying cool. Clay linings reduce seepage and keep temperatures stable. Farming here is thermal engineering disguised as agriculture. There's debate among historians about how much mathematical planning went into these irrigation systems versus gradual refinement through experience. Either way, the result is undeniable. Crops survive heat that would kill them elsewhere. People survive alongside them. You pause to drink lightly, then return to work. The sun hasn't risen yet, but its presence is already felt in the air. Farming before dawn is not optional. It's the only way fields can be tended without draining the body beyond recovery. As light strengthens, you watch farmers retreat methodically, not all at once, row by row, task by task. Work ends not when tiredness appears, but just before it would. This restraint preserves tomorrow. There's an odd but telling practice mentioned in some agricultural accounts. Farmers sometimes left small clumps of vegetation uncut deliberately, creating microshade for soil and roots. Yield sacrificed slightly in exchange for resilience. Survival again wins over efficiency. You feel pride settle quietly in your chest. Not pride in harvest numbers, but in balance achieved. Fields fed people without destroying them. The land was used, not exhausted. As the sun rises fully, you step back into shade once more. Body warm but unbroken. Farming here is never a battle. It's a conversation repeated every season, guided by heat, water, and restraint. And as the day begins its cycle again, you understand how deeply survival in this land depended not on force, but on knowing when to move, when to stop, and when to let the earth do the work for you. As evening settles in fully now, attention turns inward, toward the quiet work that rarely leaves traces in stone. The heat shaped public life visibly, but it also shaped the private rhythms of households, especially the lives of women who managed heat not in fields or quarries, but within walls that never truly escaped it. You step into a home again as lamps are lit carefully, flames kept low so they warm without burdening the air. Inside, the heat of the day lingers faintly in the walls, released slowly, gently. This is when domestic work resumes, timed deliberately to avoid strain. Women move through these spaces with practiced efficiency. Tasks are sequenced, not stacked. Grind grain first, while arms are still cool. Prepare food next, before the fire adds warmth. Save washing and weaving for later, when the air settles further. Nothing is random. Everything follows heat. You notice how water is used sparingly but strategically. Hands and faces are rinsed before work begins, not after. Cooling the body first prevents overheating during movement. A small advantage gained early multiplies later. Clothing shifts slightly now. Outer layers loosen. Sleeves are adjusted. Hair is unbound or braided differently, allowing trapped warmth to escape. These changes are subtle but immediate in their effect. Comfort returns without effort. There's a detail often overlooked in discussions of ancient life. Domestic spaces were rearranged seasonally. Sleeping mats moved. Storage shifted. Work areas migrated closer to or farther from walls depending on how heat behaved. Homes were not static. They breathed with the climate. You sit near a woman weaving, watching how she pauses regularly. Not from fatigue but foresight. Fingers rest. Breath slows. The loom waits patiently. Work resumes before stiffness sets in. This rhythm preserves joints and strength across years, not days. Some scholars argue that household labor was undervalued precisely because it left fewer monumental traces. But survival here depended on it as surely as on irrigation or stonework. Poor heat management inside the home meant illness, spoiled food, exhaustion that rippled outward into the community. Children linger nearby, helping lightly. Learning without instruction, they pass tools, fan embers, fetch water. No one explains why tasks happen when they do. The heat explains it for them. There's a curious practice mentioned in a few domestic records. Floors were sometimes swept lightly with damp reeds before evening work began. Dust settles. Air cools slightly. The difference is barely visible, but immediately felt. Comfort is built from such small choices. As night deepens, meals are finished, and spaces are cleared again. Beds are prepared low to the ground, where cooler air gathers. Windows are opened just enough to invite breeze without inviting insects or lingering heat. Sleep here is engineered, not assumed. You lie down and feel the relief spread through your back as heat finally releases its hold. This is the reward for discipline practiced all day. Not luxury. Rest. There's debate among historians about how much autonomy women had in structuring these routines. Written records are sparse, but the consistency of domestic adaptation across regions suggests deep practical authority. Heat does not negotiate with theory. It responds only to action. You drift closer to sleep, listening to the soft sounds of a household settling. Clay against clay, fabric against skin. Breath slowing collectively. The heat has shaped another day successfully. Not through force, but through care. In this place, survival is not loud. It is quiet, repetitive, and deeply domestic. And as you rest now, body cooling at last, you understand that endurance here was sustained as much by unseen hands inside shaded rooms as by anyone who labored beneath the open sun. As night deepens and the air grows gentler, you begin to notice how differently strangers move through this land. Not everyone who walked these paths grew up under this sun. Merchants, envoys, travelers from cooler regions arrive carrying habits that do not belong here. The heat notices immediately. You see it in their posture first. Shoulders tense, steps rushed, clothing chosen for appearance rather than survival. They walk as if speed will save them. And the desert answers that mistake without mercy. Faces flush faster. Breathing grows shallow. Thirst arrives suddenly and loudly. Locals notice too, though they rarely comment directly. Instead, they adjust around visitors, offering shade earlier than expected, slowing conversations, placing water nearby without explanation. Teaching here is quiet. The sun corrects loudly enough on its own. You watch a trader from the north pause awkwardly in full light. Unsure where to stand, someone gestures gently toward a wall. The trader hesitates, then moves. Relief crosses his face instantly. The lesson lands without words. There's an odd pattern recorded in trade accounts. Foreigners often misjudged distance more than difficulty. Paths that looked short became exhausting quickly when shade disappeared. Locals measured journeys by survival points. Visitors measured them by sight. Heat punished the difference. You notice how outsiders drink differently too. Too fast. Too much. They treat water as rescue rather than maintenance. Locals intervene subtly, offering smaller cups, encouraging pauses, not out of kindness alone, but practicality. A collapsed guest becomes everyone's problem. Clothing marks difference clearly. Heavy fabrics, dark dyes, tight cuts. These choices signal wealth elsewhere, but here they signal inexperience. Linen feels strange to some visitors at first. Too thin, too exposed. Then the heat teaches appreciation quickly. Some scholars suggest that Egypt's climate acted as a cultural filter, shaping interactions with outsiders as much as language or custom. Those who adapted stayed longer. Those who didn't moved on quickly, or suffered. Standing here, watching adjustment happen in real time, that idea feels undeniable. You hear a visitor complain softly about the sun's cruelty. A local smiles without responding. Cruelty implies intention. The sun has none. This distinction matters here. There's a curious note in some diplomatic correspondence. Envoys sometimes requested meetings at specific hours, citing health concerns. It sounds polite, but everyone understood the real meaning. Meet me at dawn or dusk, or not at all. Even power bent to heat. You watch visitors learn quickly or not at all. Some adopt local habits within days. They sit lower. They move slower. They drink better. Others resist, clinging to familiar routines until exhaustion forces surrender. Adaptation here is not optional. It is immediate. Children observe these differences keenly. Outsiders become cautionary examples. Heat education reinforced without formal lesson. You see a child glance at an overheated merchant, then retreat into shade earlier than usual. Learning happens everywhere. There's debate among historians about whether Egyptians saw themselves as inherently superior to outsiders or simply better adapted to their land. Watching now, the answer feels simpler. Survival breeds confidence. Confidence looks like superiority to those still struggling. As night carries on, visitors relax. Cool air restores dignity. Conversations lengthen. Differences soften. The sun's judgment fades temporarily. Tomorrow, it will return, and lessons will resume. You lie back, listening to unfamiliar accents blend with local voices. Heat has shaped culture here not through exclusion, but through insistence. Adapt or suffer. learn or leave. In this land, hospitality includes instruction, and the sun, patient and relentless, ensures everyone understands the terms eventually. Even those who understand the rules sometimes face days when the heat breaks them anyway, not through ignorance, but through excess. Too many hours without rest, a sudden shift in wind, a delayed flood. Survival here is resilient, not invincible, and occasionally, the desert reminds everyone of that. You wake to a morning that feels wrong immediately. The air is already heavy, thicker than it should be at this hour. The sun rises behind a pale haze, its light diffused but no less oppressive. This is not a normal day. Your body senses it before your mind does. People move more cautiously. Conversations shorten. There is an unspoken awareness that today will test systems that usually work. Heat like this overwhelms routines. It stretches margins thin. Fields are abandoned early. Travel is postponed. Even river work slows. This isn't fear. It's triage. Energy must be rationed more carefully than usual. There are records of such days scattered across history. Mentions of burning winds that arrived without warning. Periods when crops wilted despite irrigation. Days when even shade felt insufficient. These weren't common, but they were remembered. You feel sweat form too quickly, evaporating before it can cool. The air is too humid now, thick with moisture trapped near the river. Evaporation slows. Cooling fails. This is when heat turns dangerous. People respond by retreating further underground or deeper into thick-walled spaces. Cellars and storage pits become refuges. Even animals are guided into the coolest available spaces, packed close where shared shade helps. There's a strange stillness to these hours. The usual hum of life fades almost completely. Even insects disappear. The desert holds its breath. Some scholars argue that such extreme heat events influenced architectural evolution, pushing homes deeper into the ground over generations. Others suggest they shaped religious narratives around divine punishment or imbalance. Standing here now, struggling to cool yourself despite every learned strategy, you understand how both interpretations could grow from experience. Water use becomes surgical. No splashing. No waste. Skin is cooled directly. Cloths are pressed to pulse points. Drinking slows further. The body must not be shocked. You sit low, almost prone, pressing as much surface area as possible against cool earth. Breath becomes shallow and slow. Panic would accelerate heat faster than movement ever could. Children are watched constantly. Elderly are positioned nearest the coolest walls. Community tightens around vulnerability. No one argues. Hierarchies flatten under threat. There's a mention in later writings of days when even priests suspended rituals entirely, acknowledging conditions beyond human control. Whether symbolic or pragmatic, it reflects humility. Some forces cannot be negotiated with. As afternoon drags on, the heat finally begins to loosen. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Air shifts slightly. Sweat starts to linger again. Cooling resumes slowly. Relief arrives without celebration. Survival rarely announces itself. It simply resumes. You emerge later. Body drained but intact. Systems held. Not perfectly, but enough. Losses accounted quietly. Lessons noted carefully. These days leave marks deeper than monuments. They reinforce caution. They sharpen discipline. They remind everyone that survival is a relationship, not a guarantee. As evening settles, you rest longer than usual. The heat has taken more today. Tomorrow will require gentler pacing. In this land, disaster doesn't always roar. Sometimes it presses quietly until routines fail. And when it does, survival depends not on heroics, but on whether the quiet habits practiced every other day were strong enough to hold. When the heat finally loosens after days like that, it leaves something behind. Not damage you can point to easily, but memory. The land remembers. Bodies remember. And slowly, That memory becomes instruction passed forward, woven into habits so deeply that no one recalls when they began. You walk through the settlement again, noticing small changes that appeared after the last extreme day. A wall newly whitewashed to reflect light more strongly. An awning extended farther than before. A sleeping mat moved closer to the floor. None of these adjustments are announced. They simply remain. This is how knowledge accumulates here. Not in proclamations, but in quiet corrections. Each generation inherits a slightly improved version of survival, shaped by what nearly failed before. The desert teaches harshly, but it teaches clearly. You pause near a wall marked with faint scratches, barely visible unless you look closely. They measure flood heights, sun angles, seasons of abundance and strain. These marks are not decoration. They are memory made physical, a reminder of what the land can do. Some historians argue that Egyptian society's stability came less from centralized control and more from accumulated environmental knowledge shared across communities. The consistency of adaptation supports that idea. People survived not because they were commanded to, but because they remembered together. You think about the children you watched earlier, how quickly they learned to retreat, to sip water, to rest without being told. They are absorbing lessons written long before they were born. By the time they need them, those lessons will feel instinctive. There's an old idea preserved in later writings that wisdom here flowed backward in time as much as forward, honoring ancestors not for power, but for endurance. Whether literal belief or metaphor, it reflects something real. Survival demanded respect for what came before. You notice how stories are told in the evening now, not heroic tales, but quiet ones. The day the wind burned too hot, the year the flood came late, the time shade saved someone who didn't know they needed it. These stories don't entertain, they instruct. You sit and listen, feeling the ground cool beneath you. The heat of the day fades into something manageable, even gentle. But the lesson remains sharp. Comfort is temporary. Knowledge lasts. There's debate among scholars about how much ancient Egyptians understood long-term climate patterns versus responding only to immediate conditions. But watching these habits persist across centuries, you suspect pattern recognition mattered deeply. People notice cycles, even if they explained them differently. You feel calmer now, knowing the systems worked. Not perfectly, but enough. That knowledge breeds confidence, not arrogance. Confidence rooted in repetition. You stand and look across the land one more time, seeing not just desert and river, but layers of memory embedded in movement, architecture, and silence. Survival here is cumulative. Each day adds to it. As night deepens, you feel the day's tension finally release fully. Muscles soften, thoughts slow. The desert breathes out. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again. It always does. And when it does, the lessons carried forward will meet it quietly, without drama. Ready once more. Night has fully claimed the land now, and the desert finally releases you. The heat that ruled every decision has drained back into the sand and stone, leaving behind air that feels almost tender against your skin. You lie beneath a sky thick with stars, each one sharp and steady, and for the first time all day, your body stops negotiating with the world. The ground beneath you is cool, firm, reassuring. It carries the memory of heat without the threat of it. You stretch slightly, testing muscles that worked carefully rather than heroically. They respond without protest. This is the reward for restraint. Around you, the settlement exhales. Fires burn low and controlled, giving light without burden. Voices drift softly, unhurried. Someone laughs quietly, somewhere else. A child shifts in sleep. Life continues. Not loudly, but securely. You think back through the day, not as a series of events, but as a rhythm, waking before dawn, moving while shadows were long, drinking slowly, resting without guilt, eating lightly stopping completely when stopping was wise. Nothing dramatic, nothing wasted. Survival here was not a battle. It was a choreography. Archaeological traces make one thing clear: people who lived in this land did not endure heat by accident. They built systems, physical, social, and mental, that worked together. Walls, clothing, food, belief, timing. Remove one, and the rest strain. Keep them aligned, and life continues. There's a small detail often missed when looking at ruins. Sleeping spaces were chosen carefully. Low beds or mats close to the ground where cool air gathered. Openings positioned to catch night breeze. Insects discouraged without sealing in warmth. Sleep itself was engineered. You roll slightly onto your side, feeling air move across your skin. Sweat is gone now. Skin cool, calm. The desert feels almost gentle. But you don't forget what it demanded earlier. Respect remains, even in comfort. Some historians continue to debate whether ancient Egyptians perceived their environment as hostile or simply powerful. Lying here now, the answer feels clearer. The land was neither enemy nor ally. It was a constant. Survival came from understanding that constancy and adjusting yourself to it. You watch the stars slowly turn, barely perceptible, marking time without urgency. Tomorrow will bring heat again. It always does. But tomorrow will also bring knowledge already practiced, habits already waiting. Your breathing slows naturally. No effort required now. The body knows it is safe for the moment. That safety was earned, not granted. And as sleep approaches, you realize something quietly profound. Enduring the desert heat was never about toughness. It was about listening to the sun, to water, to walls, to your own limits, and responding with patience rather than defiance. The sand cools further beneath you. Night deepens. The world grows still. Your thoughts soften now, stretching out the way shadows did at dawn. The details of the day blur together gently, linen shifting in morning light. The cool touch of river water, the hush of midday stillness, the slow return of movement as evening arrived. Nothing presses, nothing demands. You let the weight of the day sink fully into the earth beneath you, knowing it will be there to carry it. The desert is quiet now, not empty, just resting. And so are you. Breath slows, muscles loosen. The careful discipline that kept you alive all day no longer needs attention. Night holds it for you. Tomorrow can wait. If your eyes close now, that's exactly right. If they linger open a little longer, that's fine too. There is no urgency here. Only calm. The stars continue their slow, silent watch. The land cools. The heat sleeps. And with that gentle stillness surrounding you, the story fades, leaving you exactly where you need to be. Sweet dreams.